We're going to take a few minutes to focus in on dads today, to focus in on a few things that face fathers and fatherhood and men as well. And we're going to have a look at how that relates to some wise words that come to us from a man who lived a while ago who was named John. So let me just quickly pray and then we're going to dive into the message today. Heavenly Father, we just pray right now that anything that we're meant to hear, may it stick in our hearts. May it become actions through our hands and the words we say and the thoughts we think. And anything that is a distraction and that's not meant for us, may we just let that go through. And thank you so much that we get the opportunity together to look at this. In your name and for your glory, amen. So men are under a little bit of pressure within the Australian context and the modern male landscape. So just a few facts that I looked at when I was researching, getting ready for today. Did you know that 3 out of 4 suicides are men? That fathers live about 4 years less than mothers. And when it comes to parenting, dads are torn generally between long work hours and trying to figure out how they also care for their kids and desire to be at home as well. For many dads, there is a tension between being strong, providing, having it all together, but also trying to be present and be there for people. Now, what I want to look at today is this idea that we aren't called to be perfect, that we aren't called to be everything, but we are called to be present and to be available. So some studies were done into fatherhood that investigated the pressures, the landscape, the future of fatherhood. And here are the 3 top issues facing men: mental health and suicide, chronic disease and preventable risks, work care conflict, and norms around fatherhood. And before I go on, I just want to say up front, ladies, you have your struggles as well. There's no doubt about the challenges you face. So I don't want this to become like a man. That's not what we're doing here. Listen, I'm the son of a mother. I'm the husband of a wife. I'm the father of daughters. And I'm the last person who's going to try and say who has it harder, because it's clearly not me. We're not going for comparison today, people. We are going just to recognize some of the things that are unique going on. So there are some areas that men are struggling with in general. It's not everyone's experience, but these are just what sort of comes out in general. That there's sort of some things that as brothers and as fathers, as husbands, we want to be championing the next generation well. So there's some stuff that we have to look at and we have to address. So can I just say, ladies, you can take the day off right now. You can sit back and go, oh, this is easy. Don't have to apply any of it. This is amazing. Now, if you want to apply some of it, you're welcome to. But I want to really talk to the dads and the men who are here today. So these studies highlighted 3 areas: mental health, physical health, and work. And there's some interesting things that came up that probably aren't surprising, but are nonetheless of interest for us. In the areas of mental health, surprise, surprise, it said that men are least likely to ask for help when they're struggling. That is changing, and that's a good thing, but there's still a lot of work to be done. There's some stigma still around it, unfortunately, and also people are recognizing that not all services are male-friendly. So, in the past, being a man was all about having it all together and never breaking down, and we recognize that it's not about never breaking down. It's about recognizing that when it does break down, how do we go about dealing with that? So that's the area of mental health. When it comes to physical health, what they've found is that a lot of the risk factors for men are actually health style related: diet, alcohol, smoking, inactivity. Now, this is probably tied to the mental health space, I would imagine, but you can talk to your counsellor about that. Now, guys, a counsellor, if you don't know what that is, a counsellor is someone you go to talk to through your inner world, basically. And if you feel, oh, that's too touchy-feely, this is a great way, and you can use this one. You're not going to a counsellor. You're going for a strategy session with your life coach. Sounds better. Then when you've gone and dealt with your masculinity issues, you can say, I actually do therapy, and you'll get past that. All right. Physical health. Work. Men are still expected to work and have longer hours, and often at the expense of family presence, and fathers can feel torn between providing financially and being present emotionally. Now, there's a lot of great work that's happening in this space. One of the things from next year in terms of a policy change is that dads for paid parental leave can access the other partner can access 4 weeks that's designated for them. So there are things in place that are starting to say when your child's born, being around, being present is really, really important. Now, what I've said, some of you might be thinking, yeah, that aligns with my worldview, or you might be thinking, nah, it's not that bad. Whatever it is you come from, or wherever you come from, what I'm interested in, if those are some of the struggles that men are facing, is does God, does the Bible, does Jesus speak into that space which can be helpful for us? Is there something that we can get from the wisdom of the Bible, from the life of Jesus, from the life of those who follow Jesus that could help us here and now with the current issues that are facing the modern man? I think that there is. So we're going to have a look at some wise words from someone named John. John was a disciple who followed Jesus, and he's actually referred to as the disciple that Jesus loved the most. So that's pretty cool. Now, John was a man, he lived 2,000 years ago, he followed Jesus, and eventually he wrote documents that help us, that we still use today. He wrote the Gospel according to John, and he wrote 1, 2, 3 John as well. Now, if you're skeptical about Jesus and the church or anything like that, I would love to challenge you to go and read the Gospel of John for yourself and see what it has to say. In fact, can you chuck the QR code up, please, Steph? If you have a Bible, go and look at John, read it through, all that sort of stuff. If you don't have a Bible, can I just say, this is just a quick advert. We have Bibles that we'd love to give to anyone who wants one. So they're outside in the foyer. If you can't find one, I'd love to give you one. If you are a technical person, you can follow that QR code and you can get the Bible app onto your phone. They are the YouVersion Bible app. Apparently, if you're of an older generation, you call it the YouVersion Bible app, and the younger people just call it the Bible app. I call it the Bible app, so I think I'm young still. Yay. So the Bible app, you can download that. It's coming up to 1 billion downloads in September, which is just mind-blowing. And people are downloading it to read it, but people are also downloading it because they have to read a Bible passage at their friend's wedding or their family member's wedding. So where they go to the Bible app. It's really cool. So if you are skeptical about Christianity, go and check it out for yourself. Go and read what John has to say about Jesus, who he is, how he lived, and what he did. Now, just a quick plug. If you already have the YouVersion Bible app, could you do me a favor? On the YouVersion Bible app, you can actually set LBC as your church. To which everyone said yes. You can set it as your church. So here's what you do. You ready? If you've got the Bible app, down the bottom, you can go to Discover. All right, and when you press Discover, it'll take you to some options. One of those options is church, or find a church, or whatever it is. Then when you click on that, it'll take you through to some churches that are in our area. And if you've got location turned on, you're in LBC, it should pop up as the first one. However, I have been sitting here, and it wasn't the first one. It was down the list, so you may have to swipe for some reason, because even physically being here wasn't enough for the app to figure out this is the church that I wanted. Then when you click on it, this is the tricky part. You've then got to click again to say, set as my church. I'll talk to them and say, it needs to be simpler, guys. But you can do that. And what that means is that when we send some stuff out, if you've already been part of our church, you'll get some little notifications in that. And it's just a really good way to engage. And then other people who are on the app can see this church and that it's legitimate. It's not like, oh, that church has 3 people attached to it. Oh, there's more than 3. So it helps us out. All right. Enough from that from our sponsors. Back to our program. So I feel like a salesman up here. Get the app. All right. So John, he was a fisherman. He was really successful at what he was doing. He left that to go and follow Jesus, said, no longer am I going to be a fisherman. He put down his nets, and he was through it all. John was the guy who was there through the miracles. He saw all these amazing things happen. He was there for Jesus' most intimate teaching and Jesus' big teaching as well. He saw the cross. He felt the isolation and the fear in that moment between the cross and when Jesus came back to life. And he saw Jesus come back to life and he went, I really am in the right space. And he just saw everything. He saw everything. But what's interesting about John, I flagged this a couple of weeks ago, is that John lived long. He lived for a while. So many other people who followed Jesus earlier on, so Peter, Paul, and other followers of Jesus, they were killed quite young for what they believed, and more importantly, how they then acted on those beliefs. It wasn't what they believed up here that killed them, it was the way that they followed through with their beliefs and actually did something about it that put their lives in danger. Tradition tells us that John in his final years of his life was very old, and in Ephesus he was being carried into church gatherings because he was so weak and frail. And when the early church leaned in to listen and hear what this living apostle, this living follower of Jesus had to say, John said a very interesting message. He could have talked about theology, he could have talked about leadership or visions of heaven, but the thing that John came back to again and again and again is love. Why? Because I believe that's what shaped him the most. He heard the Father say, "This is my Son, with whom I love." He had written in his gospel, "For God so loved the world." And now, as an old man, he writes this in 1 John 3:1. He says, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God," because that is what we are. So John's legacy at the end of his life was this idea that love has been received by him and love has been passed on to others. And for dads, that is our calling as well. Our calling as dads is to take this idea of love and to put it into practice. How does that look? Firstly, it looks like this: showing up. Being a dad means showing up, not perfectly, but faithfully. Secondly, it means that we actually have to work on ourselves a little bit, because what flows from our hearts and our actions will shape our children and in turn shape our children's children. And thirdly, what it means to love means to ground ourselves in God's love first and foremost. You've got to remember that before you were a dad, you were a son. And when you ground yourself in God's love, then that can shape us in our own parenting journey. So some very helpful words from John as well as that we go on in 1 John 3:16 to 18 is he says this. He defines love a little bit more clearly for us. He says, "This is how we know what love is." Because, you want to know what love looks like? Well, John says this is what it looks like. He says, "Jesus laid down his life for us," which feels really good. To know that there is a God of the universe that sent his one and only Son who was willing to die on my behalf feels amazing. But it doesn't stop there. It doesn't say, "This is what love is. Jesus died." Yay. That's not where it ends. There's an action then. And we ought, and we should, and in response to, how do we live going forward? We lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. Because of what Jesus has done, demonstrating love for us, we now get to take that and demonstrate love for others as well. We're to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. He makes it very practical again by saying, it's not just about going, "Oh, I love you, this is nice." He wants to make sure we understand this is a practical, active, moving love. He says, "If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity in them, how can God's love even be in that person?" Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. For John, love wasn't just this idea, this good thought, this good thing, I should believe in. It was an action. It was sacrifice. It was about showing up and doing the hard work. So let's put John's words with the issues that dads are facing today and see what we can get from that. When it comes to mental health and suicide, there's this idea of showing up. Men often struggle silently. As I said before, 3/4 of suicides are men. And many of them carry that stress and sadness in silence because they just don't feel they can ask for help, or maybe don't have the capacity to ask for help. John's words to us is about laying down our lives. Sometimes that means actually swallowing our pride and letting someone else in. Sometimes that means stepping forward and showing up for a mate. And so the application around showing up in our mental health is, dads, your kids don't need you to be a superhero. Your kids don't need you to have everything together. They need you to be present. They need you to be honest. And they need you to be willing to demonstrate, to show, to go first what it means to say, actually, I'm not going okay. And that will help them be able to do the same as well. When it comes to the area of chronic disease and preventable risks, there's this idea of working on yourself. Men carry a bigger burden of heart disease, and lifestyle-related illnesses. And the main reason that came out of the studies is why? Because we just ignore it until it breaks. Men will, and I'm not a car guy, so this is not me. My cars are not well looked after. But for those of you, there are guys out there who will make sure that their car is so finely tuned. They'll make sure, there's a little dent. They'll go, oh no, the engine's sounding a little. Oh. But they'll ignore all the personal health risks until something happens. So what does it mean to actually step out and work on ourselves before we break? John's words say, love with action and in truth. Looking after your health is not an act of selfishness, it's actually an act of love. Strong dads leave behind strength, not stress as a legacy. So the application here is, dads, you need to guard your heart physically and spiritually. We need to actually work on ourselves, to take that walk, get that checkup, slow down, and try and deal with the habits that are harming us. because the things that we're going to pass on aren't optional. They're going to impact the next generation. And then finally, in the place of work, care, and conflict, grounding ourselves in God's love. Men feel torn between providing and being present, and we work long hours and everything like that, but what you've got to remember at the end of the day is that your children, and some of you unfortunately are reflecting upon your fathering experience, and if you'd heard this when you were younger, may have been able to do something about it, but for those of you with young kids, the thing we've got to remember again and again and again is that children measure love in time. They measure love in time. It doesn't matter how good your title is. It doesn't matter how prestigious your job is. At the end of the day, your kid doesn't remember what your job is. They remember who you were when you showed up for them again and again. This morning, I got to sit down and open up all the things from school, and I think it was Zoel's. It says, like, what does your dad do? And Zoel put, my dad talks to the church and talks into a microphone so they can hear him. I'm like, thanks, Zoel. Kids are so honest and beautiful. And every year it's the same thing, because I don't cook. Like, I'm really bad. I do cook occasionally, noodles apparently. That's the default. But every year the same things come back from my kids. Who does the cooking? And they're like, not Dad. I'm like, I got kicked out of that a while ago. That's not how it should always be. It's just my skill set's lacking, that's all. Anyway, so grounding yourself in God's love. Measuring love in time is what children will do. And that is so, so important to make sure that we work on ourselves, to ground ourselves in God's love and to be present and be available where we can. John's words to us say, this is how we know what love is, that Jesus laid down his life. Jesus chose to go second, which means dads and father figures. Love means choosing people and those key relationships over performance. So for some of us, we need to, as fathers, lay down our lives for our kids by actually putting them first, by putting our things second so that they can experience the best of who we are and experience the best of our presence and the best of our love. We have the example of Jesus as those of us that follow him. His example of laying down his life becomes our example to be dads that put our kids first. So, time to land this plane. And Lauren, you can go and get the kids now. Is Lauren out there? Where is she? Oh, yeah, perfect. Yep, thank you. Kids are going to come in a second and give us some lollies. That's very fun. Yeah, I know. Go. So, here's where we're finishing. John lived the longest, and he got to see everything. And at the end of his life, when he summarized his whole experience of following Jesus, and just a reminder, when John was following Jesus, it was not a popular decision. It was not a popular decision. There was no gain for John. There's no gain for him in following Jesus at the time other than his faith and his relationship with God. Everything was up against them. But when he followed Jesus and as he lived out his life, he kept coming back to the same thing again and again and again. And the thing that John kept coming back to was this idea of love. Little children, love one another. That was the motivation. That was the thing. We should give a lot of weight to what John has to say because he lived and saw more than what the others got to see. So fathers, the heart of our calling is to show up. Kids don't need perfection, they just need presence. To work on ourselves, to cultivate heart and habits that our children get to inherit. To ground ourselves in God's love, to remind ourselves before we were a father, we were a son. Because every dad leaves a legacy. John got to leave love as his legacy, and I believe that we can as well. And I just want to take a moment just to think about this. How different is our world when there are loving father figures present and sowing into the next generation? How different are our homes, our churches, our cities when fathers step up and show up and work on themselves and love from a place of being loved? It has transformational impact through generations. Because it's not just good fatherhood to be doing that. That's actually gospel fatherhood. That's good news fatherhood. When fathers are present and loving and kind. That's the type of fatherhood that has the power to change our world. So dads, stepdads, uncles, granddads, father figures, I leave you with this question today. It's up on the screen. Will you take up the same call to lay down your life in love, to show up faithfully, and to hand down love that lasts to the next generation? I'm going to read that one more time. Will you take up the same call that John had of love? To lay down your life in love, to show up faithfully, and to hand down a love that lasts to the next generation. Let me pray for you, and then we're going to get the kids in here. Father God, thank you so much that you are a good, good Father. And I pray for those of us who have fathering roles, whether that's dads, stepdads, uncles, granddads, any father figures, teachers, coaches. I just really do pray that love becomes the motivator, the driving thing that we operate from. May we operate from that space, not selfishness, not from our brokenness, but from the love that you so richly have provided us. Give us the strength to do it, and give us the strength to move away from the destructive parts of our lives that do not allow that to happen. Remove us from those situations and put us into places where we can grow and love deeply. In your name and for your glory. Amen.